Okay, where we start last night is Luka Doncic, who had an amazing 60-point effort as the time we record this last night. 60-point effort, 21 rebounds, and 10 assists. Bob Ryan, where does this rank in efforts, individual efforts that you have seen throughout your illustrious career?
Well, it's an all-timer. It's right up there with some of the greatest individual games, certainly that the league has known. I think, and the thing about this, though, to me, is I think we don't start with Luka. We start with Nikola, and then we talk about the fact that are we talking about a Middle European? Anything you can do, I can do better. I mean, let's go back to Christmas Day, folks. No, actually, let's go back to the 18th of the month when Jokic and the Nuggets were playing host to Charlotte, and he hit them with a 40-27-10 triple, which we thought was pretty good, in a 4-point game. That's the other thing.
Right.
Then on Christmas Day, he went 41-15-15 in a 3-point overtime win. Note this. Now we got Luka last night. The numbers are staggering, okay? 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists in an overtime comeback win. And he tied the game up to get it into overtime on and as a result, after having deliberately missed a free throw and all the ball being batted around, he heaved one from about 12 feet and it went in. Anyway, look, this guy is a marvel. He's not sculpted. Neither one of them. They're not sculpted.
That's what I was thinking. When you were saying that, that's exactly what I was thinking, Bob. It's like these guys' physiques compared to the rest of the top players in the NBA, they're in the gym, I'm sure, but they don't look like they're.
No, it's like when you look at a guy like a good example of a big man who is, extraordinarily overtly athletic, Embiid. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about him before we're done too, what he's doing. And he's an athlete and he's an excellent basketball player. These other guys they're athletic, in a bird sense, the hand-eye, the intelligence.
They're good athletes.
Good, but they're basketball players. That's what they are. And there's if you're both, okay. But if you can you don't have to be extraordinarily athletic in the sense that we have come to, define it in the 21st century to be a good basketball player. And these two guys are obviously exceptional basketball players. The thing that I love about both of them, particularly Doncic, because he is smaller and he does face the basket and handle the ball actually directly more. He goes wherever he wants to go. Yeah. And he goes at his pace. I'm coming. You're not stopping me. I'm taking my time. This is part of the deal. That what makes it so fascinating to watch him.
You know what the incredible part is? His supporting cast. The second best player is Christian Wood. Spencer Dinwiddie's a nice player, right? Tim Hardaway Jr. is a nice player, but this dude needs help. And maybe that's part of why he's putting up these ungodly numbers is because he has to, and he's got the ball in his hands all the time. And you actually hear people criticizing the Mavs for that. Everybody else stands around and watches. Well, they don't. I mean, he does do a lot of dribbling, but he finds guys. He scores. He rebounds his position about as well as anybody in the league. And again, he might. I tweeted it last week. Tatum, MVP front runner. Listen, it could change every game with these guys.
We've got a lot of worthy candidates this year.
That's right. And
that's fine. And, this is a discussion that, 20 years ago wouldn't be taking place any earlier than the trading deadline at the earliest. That's where we are now because of people like us and talk shows and the proliferation of media and competition and topics needed.
Well, I also think, Bob, it's that, but I also think the parity of the talent in the league has increased greatly. If you went 20 years ago, it was, well, let's do, where are we then? I mean, that's the Michael, right?
20 years ago was the Shaq Kobe era,
Shaq Kobe. So, but generally, as I remember, and we could start with Larry and Magic, it was Larry Magic, and really nobody else. Then it was Michael, and then Barkley a little bit, and then you went to Shaq and Kobe. But now you go across the league, and I think it is because of the European impact on the league, is you go from whether it's Memphis or Dallas or Denver or Boston or New Orleans or the Lakers on any given night or the Clippers. I mean, I was just looking at the standings. I mean, there's like a Hall of Fame stud on like 15 teams.
I wonder, Bob, why is that? Why do you think that is, that there's more guys across the league than just two dominant players, two or three?
I think part of it's the globalization.
No question.
And I'm big on that. And also just guys get inspired. I would like to think that Ja Morant, the little Ja Morant, right. I don't know if he overlapped, if he would have looked up to, say, Iverson. I think Iverson was an inspiration for some guys in at his time, for sure. And we all know how many guys have been inspired by Kobe, the current crop.
This generation. Yeah,
they're inspired by these guys. Yeah. I mean, I never get tired of watching Ja Morant.
Well, I mean, I'm with you on that one, Bob. But I mean, just real quickly, I mean, if you look in the East from the Celtics to the Bucks, down to the Nets, which will get the Cavaliers have studs now. I mean, Garland had 46 the other night. The 76ers, and you're talking about Embiid. Yep. The Heat are in the 8th, but we know the Heat have players. Then you go over to the West, and you go to Mavericks, Suns, Clippers, Grizzlies, Pelicans, Nuggets, and even the the Trailblazers, all stars.
Oh, Lillard
All-stars on every team. The league has never been better when it comes to talent.
Lillard was on my top 75. He was close. He was one of my last selections. Zion is playing. He's on the floor. Knock on wood right now.
Yeah, Kawhi's coming back. Kawhi's coming back now, and
right.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a bountiful.
Well, I wonder how much of this too, guys, is when you're looking at the numbers now. It's a different league now where all the numbers are I don't want to say inflated, but they're obviously offensively they're so different than they've ever been. I wonder if that plays into it at all too.
Sure. I mean, listen, kids are coming out of the womb shooting a three.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. You got 7-footers. Everybody can shoot the three, right? I mean, everybody. That's pretty much
everybody but Ben.
Right. Well, yeah.
No, I'm not. By the way,
conversation.
I've been keeping my eye on Ben. I want to make sure we touch on him before we get out of here today. But no, you're right. It's the world. Oh, of course. And I think the greatest. Well, I'm just throwing this into the conversation because he is a 7-footer who shoots threes. The most amazing career adjustment I have ever seen in all the years I've covered the league, 53 plus years, is Brooke Lopez.
Yeah.
Going from being a textbook, back to the basket, aircraft carrier, Al McGuire center, into a guy who is a major three-point threat. Look at and you go back and just look at his career stats and how it wasn't even part of his thinking when he came into the NBA. And look what he's become. And the tribute to him. He did the thing that I wish Ben would do, but that's another story. Anyway, no. So he's an example. Embiid's a three-point. Jokic is a three-point shooter. Of course, Doncic is, but Jokic is 6'10", 6'11". No, it's the game now. It's the game. it's the game. And then the part B of this is, and we mentioned that Ja Morant. Once upon a time, there was a distance spot in the league that I called Curry Land, and he was its sole occupant. He was the only guy who operated in Curry Land. Well, guess what, folks? Trae Young operates in Curry Land, and he ain't the only one. And
but he's not Steph Curry.
No, he's not. But he shoots.
He can make him from there. Yes, he can make him.
I'm just saying.
Well, at some point, maybe next episode, I do want to talk a little bit about Trae Young because some of the speculation that he'll be the next. I think Chris Haynes put it out there. He'll be the next All-Star to demand a trade, and. Where the league's going with that.
Okay, fine. That's good.
We'll keep with that. That's a big market tease right there. So as we pay homage to Luka, you wanted to touch, which was a terrific night again, 60 points, 21 rebounds, and 10 assists. Again, in a 126-121 win over the Knicks. You wanted to touch on Embiid, Bob. And before we move on to the Nets, I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, well,
the last three games, he's at 48, 35, and 44.
Take your, don't sleep on Philly. Don't sleep on Philly. And Yeah, I got Embiid here. Where the hell? Oh, here we go. His last 3 games, 44, 35, 48. And he can do it every which way. He can put it on the floor and take it to the hoop. He can post up. He can face that three. He's a monster. And he just he's also a character, which is fun.
Yes.
And I don't know what he's like.
He's a blast.
I don't know what he's like. If he's if he's I don't know. You tell me, but I enjoy.
No, he's fun. He's fun. He's happy. He's always smiling. Again, I know a lot of people probably don't like him around the league because he talks a lot, and there'll be some supposed cheap shots that he might take on the court. But Joel has always been one of those guys that just kind of embraces people, and I think that's the fun part. You need personalities in the NBA, and he's one of them because a lot of guys are, I don't want to say too cool. But they are. They watch like Kobe, right? Like you said, Bob, right. They grew up watching Kobe, and Kobe was too cool, right? He didn't want to show too much. He wanted to be that guy that just, was a stone cold, killer in terms of how his mentality was. So I think Embiid, to see his personality is a lot of fun. And again, there's nobody like Joel out there. When Joel is focused, there's nobody who can stop him? Nobody.
No, we know that the Celtics have had their hands full with him over the years, and if they would have played them in the playoffs, it would be a handful. A team I think I want to get to because clearly something's going on and good for them, and that's the Nets.
Right.
There was an interesting story in the New York Post on Tuesday of this week, in which the thrust of it was, we're doing well because it's all about basketball.
Right.
And I think we all understand what that's referring to.
Bob, can I interject real quick? I also saw that it's their defense.
Oh, yeah. Well, they played none before. Absolutely. No. They played none before. Right. That's what, but they're, that who is not distracting them. As a matter of fact, who, his last 5 games, you ready?
Go ahead.
32-38. Oh, 4 games. He sat out at the 3rd game. His last 4 games, 32-38, 18-32. Talking about Mr. Irving. He can play. You never forget. I never forgot for 1 second when he was going through all his stuff last year. The guy can play. He's an all-time talent. All-time talent.
Yeah, I mean, the key is, again, getting those 3 on the same page, which apparently they've done at least this last stretch of winning 13 of the last 14. And Ben Simmons can be what Ben Simmons is, right? If you have 2 of the best offensive players ever to play this game on the floor at the same time, you can afford to have Ben Simmons. We'll see in the playoffs if it catches up to him that he doesn't shoot.
Here's his last 4 games. Assists. 8, 8, 8, 8. Okay?
And look at rebounds. Look at rebounds.
Here's his last 6 games FGAs. You ready?
Yep.
9-7-5, 7-9-5.
Yeah.
The guy knows who he is.
Yep, he does.
Now,
he does.
I of course have an objection to.
You don't like it. Yeah, you don't like it, but it fits with those 2 guys better than any 2 players probably in the NBA right now.
Absolutely. It's a wise move for them and so you got to pay attention to them. Now they've added a component in TJ Warren,
who could score. Another
score.
Yes.
And that is coming off a 23-point game his last game. I looked him up. He's one of those guys that you have to.
He had a great year 2 years ago. Then he got hurt. He got hurt in Indiana.
That he had a 3-year run of 19, 18, and 19 points a game. Well, I didn't. He just flew under my radar. I
remember how good he was in the bubble. Do you remember? You remember the bubble?
Now that you mention it.
Right.
Yes.
He went bananas in the bubble.
I had forgotten that.
Then he got hurt, but he's perfect. Again, you throw him out there with KD and Kyrie, and then you got Ben Simmons with like Royce O'Neal or Claxton, one of those guys. And listen, the bottom line is Ben Simmons, prior to the injury, was one of the best defenders in the game. Okay. Claxton is a good defender. Royce O'Neal's KD's a good defender. The only one of the group that sucks defensively is Kyrie. And TJ Warren's not a great defender either. But Kyrie is the one guy who cannot defend and will not defend out of that group. But the rest of them can, and if they're willing, like we'll see now. Like and give Jacque Vaughn a ton of credit here because it was supposed to be Ime Udoka, according to a couple of the biggest media people out there who said it was going to be Ime. That fell through, and they settled for Jacque Vaughn. But you know what? All it's about is, like, to me, managing people is the biggest thing for Absolutely. Whether it was Steve Nash. And Steve Nash was probably too nice a guy. My guess is Jacque Vaughn kind of holds them a little bit more accountable. But, yeah, I mean, this team is rolling right now, and we'll see if they can continue it, and then we'll see what it looks like in the playoffs.
I mean, and there's additional firepower sitting in the wings with Seth Curry.
Yeah.
Harris is hurt again. He may, I don't know if we'll ever count on him. I'll have to X him out of it for the time being. But Seth Curry will be back. They got firepower. They're starting to look like one of those teams you don't want to face in the playoff teams, which you get in every sport, You don't want to. But, hey, good for the mix. It's fine. They're I think they're very much for real.
I want to elaborate on Jacque Vaughn a little bit because I saw this, Jeff, and I'm paraphrasing here. We stripped the playbook. Guys are playing free of mind. Are you seeing that, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like they're again. I think sometimes too, it's just a voice needs to change. Sometimes it's the right time, and it had run its course with Nash, and I'm not sure he was that unhappy. Also, where for Jacque Vaughn, this is another opportunity, and kind of like Joe Mazzulla in a way. Obviously, Joe Mazzulla comes in with a better culture this year, but there were a lot of issues going on left behind from Ime that he had to kind of clean up. And it's a players' league now. We know that. Unless your name is Greg Popovich, you're not going to lay down the wood with these guys. You got to let them kind of at least feel like they're running the show. Maybe that's the biggest thing, right? Like make them believe they're running the show, but they're not quite running the show.
That's a good point. It's a good point. Hey, before we go on, I just want to back up one more time, just to point out the story. Luka Doncic will not turn 24 years of age until February 28th, 2020.
I mean, this kid could go down. I mean, at this pace, what he's doing, like, I mean, again, just at such an early age to be this dominant. And part of it, I remember Mike Schmitz, who worked for ESPN, him telling me in that draft, he was touting Luka as the number one pick in that draft. And Mike's now with the Portland Trailblazers, but just telling me like how far advanced he was at that young age from international competition. And
probably was 15 when he turned pro.
It's amazing. Again, but again, him and Tatum and Ja at such a young age to be this dominant, and they've got all it is health for those guys. And then there's some other young, I tweeted that out. I said, like, these three are all under 25. And people were like, well, what about, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards? I'm like, no, those guys aren't in that category. Like, those three are in kind of a category by themselves right now in terms of players under 25. And I think you're splitting hairs to some degree when you try to figure out who's the best of the three. They're all different. I think most people would take Luka right now, and rightfully so. But Luka's also got the ball in his hands all the time. Tatum doesn't. Ja's special too. He just does it a little bit differently than a lot differently than Luka.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Anyways, Bob, do you have something else, Bob?
Not something that's flashed across my mind, but it's skidded out into the.
Yeah, I hear you, dude. I'm sorry, I missed you.
Okay.
Anyways, the Celtics did beat the Rockets. That's really not the discussion, but the Celtics have turned it around in that, Bob, the Bucks, that was a statement game. It amazes to me, the Celtics are still on top of the East, despite that little, speed bump that they had, which at the time looked like a brick wall. I was like, oh my God, are the wheels going to come off? Well, I didn't feel that the wheels going to come off, but I was like, okay, when are they going to, we knew they'd be back. But then the winner of Milwaukee was much needed and seemed to set them back on track after 2 losses to Orlando.
Yeah, and they I wasn't panicking. I wanted to, but I definitely thought that they needed to show up against Milwaukee, and they did, and that was very reassuring. But go look at the 3-point shooting. I'm sorry, live by it, die by it thing.
Yeah,
I still what ultimately still worries me about this team in the long run. And although we're going to get to a new component that changes things, but they were shooting at an extraordinarily high rate in the beginning of the year, and there had to be a market correction, and we had that severe market correction in that stretch that you just alluded to, and even the first half last night there was another dreadful first half shooting before they and all that, but there, I was reassured about that. Now let's get to the big addition. Because when they were
there last night, right? You were there.
I was there last night.
Not a big time win, but there was something that you saw.
By the way, talking about youth, the team that Stephen Silas put on the floor, the elder statesman of the starting lineup was 22 years of age.
Wow.
Kevin Porter Jr. And ranged from 19. By the way, Jalen Green. He's pretty damn good. You knew that. You told me. You told me, Jeff Goodman. You sold him to me. I didn't, but I like him a lot. You have to like him. Okay, folks. You can't overestimate how important Robert Williams is going to be to this team if they're ever going to win a championship in the year 2023. Robert Williams already has made significant contributions to this team, and he does stuff they can't get anywhere else. First of all, they're not a good rebounding team in general terms. You know that they have nobody in the top 20. I think it's 20. The leading rebounder statistically, I think, is Tatum with 8 a game. Okay. Now they got a guy that gets the ball and he keeps balls alive. There was a great sequence last night with a back tap, boom, for a 3-pointer for Grant Williams, stuff like that. He's been doing it, and he's been doing it from the minute he came back. Even in the lost games, he was making contributions. Last night, look at the rebound totals. He had 10 in the first 11 minutes he was on the floor. He's running around on guarding 6 different guys at defense at once. They need this guy. This guy changes a lot. A lot.
Yeah. No, he gives anybody a different element, right? I mean, Al Horford is almost the complete opposite of Robert Williams in a lot of ways, right? You're not throwing lobs to Al Horford.
No,
you're throwing lobs. He's a bailout guy on offense, where if you get in the lane and you don't know what you're doing, you can just kind of throw it up there and go let him get it. He'll get it on his own anyway off the offensive glass. And then defensively, he gives you what you haven't had, which is a rim protector and a rebounder.
Yep.
Now, the biggest question for me is, will he be healthy when it matters most? Period. That's all that matters to me.
Keeping him on the floor has been the entire story for his career here, and that's it. So, but I just think it's been to me a stark reminder of his importance is what we're looking at here. I don't think we can overstate that how important he can be. And when they were going, I wrote this and I'll say repeat it here. When they were at their peak, which was up 45 points in Phoenix, that team wasn't winning the championship. They're winning only if they have Robert Williams.
Right. I agree. I mean, you might get to the finals or something like maybe without Robert Williams, but to me, the game changes in the playoffs. We know that the game changes, and again, it worries me that they are so 3-point reliant.
Right.
This team, and now with Robert Williams, not that he's a huge offensive piece, but he gives you that different dimension that you don't have to be quite as offensive. Even if he can go up there and get those offensive boards. And again, he'll make it tougher for other teams to score. Would you play him? Like if you're Joe Mazzulla, and coach last night, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Joe's
an eye issue.
Okay, Jeff, we just lost you for a second.
Had his trouble struggling through his pregame. His eye was bothering him.
Jeff's back. Gotcha. Go ahead, Bob. What did Jeff? What were you talking about with Mazzulla?
That he had he didn't coach last night because he had some eye issue with his eye right before the game.
Yeah, but he also was. I read in the paper this morning saying he's not committing to starting Robert Williams in the short, at least in the which. It's all about how many minutes he's on the floor. I'm not going to over stress on that at all. We know we want to restrict his minutes anyway.
Right.
So that's right now.
I wouldn't play him honestly.
I like the way they're using him.
I would not have him ever see 30 minutes a game in the regular season. I don't think there's any reason for it. You have Al Horford. You just kind of you got enough guys. Unless you're sitting Al Horford.
Luke has been, Luke Cornett is not a. He's not.
He's been fine. Yeah, he's fine. He's fine. Listen, we could play you. Hey, Bob, we could play you next to Tatum, Brown, Brogdon, and Smart, and you might give up a few on the defensive end, but you'll be fine.
Oh, by the way, what I'm about to tell you is not in any way meant to be judgmental. It's just curious. And it struck me. It hit me when at one point in the game last night, Jaylen Brown had 28 points at that moment. In addition to which he had 0 rebounds and 0 assists at that moment. That is an odd line. That's all. Now, he eventually got a couple of assists, and the assists didn't surprise me. The rebounds did. But anyway, it was jumping out at me, 28-0-0. All right, anyway.
All right,
by the way,
Bob, I do want to wrap up the show quickly. I think that your personal connection with the league over the years, people found very interesting. And obviously, it was emotional for you last night to see Stephen Silas there as the Rockets coach, who is Paul's son. Paul recently just passed away, one of the Celtic greats.
I had intended to go to this game as far back as 3 or 4 weeks ago anyway, but I knew I had to go to this game once Paul passed, that Stephen was coming and pay my respects. And I'll tell you what, it was emotional for me. I didn't anticipate this kind of reaction because I have known that young man. I've been in his presence minimal times. The first time was when he was about, I told you I played Nerf ball on my knees with him in Paul's house in Seattle, when he was like an infant or a toddler, excuse me. And then we did a podcast 2 years ago, before the last season. Anyway, great. I've never been in his presence that much to see him. And I'm sitting there looking at him up on that podium last night and in the visitors coach's room. And I'm looking at, oh my God, he is a younger, his face now, he's growing, he's 40 years old. That's Dad. And I hadn't ever seen it. And it just hit me because I was so emotionally tied to Paul Silas. And I was choked up, and I personally was. And of course, he is so intelligent, and he spoke so welcomingly about his dad. And it touched me, I have to tell you. It really did.
On that note, gentlemen, have a happy new year. Always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Every day. This episode of the Bob Ryan and Jeff Goodman podcast is brought to you by Athletic Greens. Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase.